Coming up on AEA Amplified, Susan Wendell Beam, Manager of Accessory Services in Anchorage, Alaska.
From the Aircraft Electronics Association, this is AEA Amplified, a podcast for aviation's technology experts, with your host, Jeff Hill.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to AEA Amplified, brought to you by Genesis Aerosystems, a leading provider of integrated avionics systems for military and civil operators around the world. From rugged integrated flight displays to flight control systems for rotor and fixed-wing aircraft, Genesis has solutions to increase safety and decrease pilot workload, whatever the mission may be. To learn more about how Genesis can help your customers, visit genesis-aerosystems.com. And Happy New Year once again, everybody. I'm Jeff Hill with the AEA and your host for this first episode of the new year. It's January 2021, and our guest is Susan Wendell Beam, who is the manager of Accessory Services, and that's an AEA member avionics repair station in Anchorage, Alaska. So Susan, thank you so much for joining us. And how is everything up in Alaska here in the heart of winter?
Well, hello to everyone and Happy New Year. We're hoping for a more prosperous and less complicated 2021. But in Alaska, we are happy to say that we're gaining daylight every day now that we pass the winter solstice. So that's exciting for us up here. It gets light about 9:30 and doesn't get dark till 5 o'clock. So,
Wow.
And we've had a nice winter with snow, but I would say mild for us with an average temperature of probably 21 degrees.
Well, that's not too bad. I could tolerate 21 degrees. It's not Florida, but yeah, that's certainly doable. So I know they're in Anchorage. Where exactly is your shop located? Is it the international airport, or where exactly is it?
Yes, we are located on Anchorage International Airport. We are on the south side of the airport. So if a customer were coming via the road, they would have to go to the south side of the airport, but we are in a beautiful hangar that's situated on a taxiway, so accessible by small and large planes. We have a very large ramp, so some of our customers are flying larger planes, Gulfstreams, Saabs, etc. So.
Right. And I know your shop there, you recently, within the last couple of years, even you've added some new ratings and capabilities since you first joined the company. And I think you joined it back, I believe, in June of 2019, so less than 2 years ago. But tell us a little bit about the shop and maybe the type of work you perform for your customers and maybe the types of products or aircraft that you all specialize in.
Yeah, historically, Accessory Services was just that. 145 repair station that concentrated on accessories, specifically starter generators, blower assemblies, that sort of thing. And historically, they were located off the airport. So when I came on board, the vision was to grow the repair station, to add ratings, to become both accessory and radio avionics shop, to be able to better serve customers. With the closing of some 145 shops, it kind of left a gap here at Anchorage International. So we were fortunate to get our radio class ratings and then kind of help grow, obtain some dealerships with avionics manufacturers. And so with the hangar, the access to the hangar being on the airport, now we're kind of 50-50 accessories and avionics installation, avionics repair.
Sure. And I know we're a little bit past, just out of curiosity, I know we're past the ADS-B deadline, which is over a year ago. But are you all seeing customers still coming in to do some ADS-B work, or has that pretty much fallen off now?
We are seeing some, not as much as before, but in Alaska, there's a lot of airspace that didn't require ADS-B. And so depending on customers, a lot of customers were just kind of waiting to see, especially rural customers, and specifically in Western Alaska, where although it would be great for them to have the equipment, they kind of held off. So we're still seeing a little bit of the request for ADS-B.
Yeah, that's a great point there on within the state of Alaska there, and exactly the geographic areas that it's required. So, you know, I'm sure we have a lot of listeners who have probably never been to Alaska, but I'm not sure that folks even within aviation have a full appreciation of how important general aviation is to the state of Alaska. Can you just talk about what aviation, how that's so important within your state of Alaska?
Sure. Our road system is very limited. We have a main highway that goes north to Fairbanks, and you could continue on, excuse me, through Canada, and then the road system goes south to the town of Homer. So the road system is very limited. Past Fairbanks, there is what locals call the haul road. And so it's mostly trucking that would transport goods from Anchorage, Fairbanks, to the town of Dead Horse. That's considered, on the north slope of Alaska where the oil fields are. So that's it for roads for our state. Coastal towns will receive goods by barge, but every other small town, village, even regional hubs, mostly get anything you can think of, anything that you would buy at a store, they're getting by airplane, including passenger service. And I know passenger service has really struggled with COVID, but in Alaska, what a lot of air carriers have done are require people to have COVID test, and so they'll still transporting people via aircraft, because it's vital to our state and to those communities. Without aviation, they would be in a world of hurt, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important there with business and general aviation, kind of the lifeline for connectivity up there. And you personally have worked in the aviation industry for more than 30 years. So tell us a little bit, how did your aviation career get started?
Well, I think I was always interested in aviation growing up in Alaska. Having friends of my parents that had small planes, being fortunate to go to remote areas as a child in general aviation aircraft. And it was just exciting to me. And so I decided to pursue aviation as a career. And that led me to getting my airframe and power plant rating, which was exciting. I had the opportunity to work on DC-6s to 747s throughout that. And then I was fortunate when I started working for Era Aviation, they had a very depth-filled instrument and avionics shop, and I was hired by them and fortunate to learn on the job, which at the time I thought, wow, I'm learning all these things and I'm getting paid to do it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got started. It was just, I think, that being in Alaska and being around aviation, we're close to Lake Hood, that is only a mile from Anchorage International Airport. and I will guess probably, and this is not an exaggeration, probably 500 general aviation aircraft on that lake.
Wow. Yeah. So, and I don't know, at one point, did you leave Alaska to do any educational studies, or have you always stayed there in Alaska?
Well, I did go to Northern Arizona University, and I have a degree in biology, and that at the time was my passion, but I finished my education when the end of the Alaska pipeline era.
Hmm.
It had been complete, and they were starting to produce oil, but there just weren't jobs in that field if you wanted to stay in Alaska. So it was like I need to do something else, and I think just the thought process and the logic thinking that comes with science carries over to aviation on troubleshooting and resolving problems. So
Right. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, did you spend some time with Northwest Airlines on the commercial side?
I did. I worked in Minneapolis at the maintenance hub, and it was fascinating work. Great people that I worked with. Beautiful facility, but the mountains aren't too big in Minnesota. So Alaska kind of called me back.
Yeah, Alaska hasn't beat. So, and I know that it's the majority of your career. I believe you mentioned Era Aviation when you went back to Alaska, but what was that experience like at Era Aviation in your career?
Again, good. I started in the instrument shop for Era. So they held both 135 and 121 air carrier certificates, and they owned the 145 repair station. So it was kind of a one-stop shop to support the air carrier side. But in addition, we did a lot of work for other operators and for general aviation, not only in Anchorage, but all over the state. So, and again, I learned on the job, and it was a very exciting time. We had a lot of interesting projects. Era, the aviation division, also had a helicopter division, so avionics supported both fixed wing and rotor wing aircraft. So the variety of jobs was just unbelievable. And charter work at the time, there was charter work in Russia, in China, in Croatia, uh, supporting fire contracts all over the Western US. So seemed like there was always something changing or different with that job. So it was a great time to be in aviation, and just the variety of things was incredible.
Sure, yeah, the variety of things, and you've kind of worn all of the hats in the avionics shop industry. You've worked your way up from technician to supervisor to manager. So I'm curious again, getting back to being in Alaska and the Alaska time zone. Does that from a timing standpoint, how does that impact your operations when you're dealing with customers who say they may be located on the east coast of the United States? Do you all have to make some adjustments in that regard, being in the Alaska time zone?
Well, we do, and typically what we do is we know if we want to do business with anyone on the eastern side of the US that we need to have that accomplished by noon. And we have a lot of vendors that we deal with on the East Coast. So um, I think the internet and just we do a lot of internet communication. So requesting quotes or purchasing parts. Um, it's not a phone call really anymore. It's on the internet, and so that makes a difference, because I can request a quote late in the evening here in Alaska, and when I come in the morning, it will be there because they're already at work. So now for us, if we're AOG for something, that's a bit of an issue. And typically a lot of places here in Alaska will do like a counter to counter request if they are AOG and absolutely need a part. So
Right. Sure. That's got to be on making those adjustments and just being aware of it, and you probably are used to it, so it's just business as usual for you all. But once again, we are visiting with Susan Wendelbeam of Accessory Services here on AEA Amplified, presented by Genesis Aerosystems, a leading provider of integrated avionics systems for military and civil operators around the world. To learn more about how Genesis can help your customers, visit genesis-aerosystems.com. And Susan, those of us who work in the aviation industry and have done it for many years, certainly understand the workforce challenges that we currently face and that are, quite frankly, projected into the future by several studies. But how do you recruit and find technicians in Alaska? And has that been a challenge for you and the companies that you've worked for during your career?
yes, it seems to be a challenge. And what we chose to do at Accessory Services, and I have to give a big shout out to our Chief Inspector, Devin Miles, who is an incredible technician and trainer. And we were only too strong for a while. When we first came on board, we had both worked for Aviation had been purchased by a company called Raven Alaska. We had both worked for Raven, and when Raven ceased to exist, we both came on board at Accessory Services, but we made the commitment to hire apprentice workers. And we struggled with finding licensed technicians or technicians with experience. Geographically, it's hard people either want to be in Alaska or not. It doesn't seem like there's any middle ground. And that's a big commitment for someone to move to Alaska, especially if they have family that lives elsewhere in the US. It's a long ways away. And we understood that, and we struggled to hire help. But through LinkedIn, we put out a position for apprentice help, and we had a lot of applicants, and we have 3 apprentice workers, 2 with no aviation experience, 1 with a little, but they're actually very refreshing and a joy to work with because they want to learn, and they're very serious about it. So that's kind of how we're resolving it. It's a little more work on our end, but it seems to have fit that void.
Well, it's wonderful that your company there, your shop, is taking matters into its own hands with the apprentice program, and that's certainly great advice that I think all shops can follow is to take advantage of those apprentice opportunities and create them and mold them and train the next generation. But I'm also curious, what advice would you give to, whether it's an aspiring technician or even a pilot or anybody who's just interested in aviation, particularly to young girls and women who might want to consider a career in avionics? What advice would you have for them?
I would say if you're interested, to go for it. There's I think it's very rewarding. There's I think huge reward in troubleshooting and fixing a problem on an aircraft. I think it's very rewarding to look at the panel of an aircraft that you're going to do a new installation on, the before and after, and what you've done. And I think if you're willing, you can learn. I think anyone can learn. It's just having that mindset that you want to and that you can do it. And I think for me, it's interesting because clearly now I do a lot of paperwork and admin and work with the FAA, but I still go to the hangar and I still resolve issues on aircraft, and that's the fun part of the job for me. But I think, yeah, and it's unfortunate that I don't think girls or women even think about maintenance or avionics as a career, but hopefully organizations like Women in Aviation, will slowly change that.
Yeah, those are great points and some great advice, and certainly you can serve as a mentor to those aspiring young ladies who want to begin a career in avionics. So thank you to the efforts that you're putting forth there. You had mentioned earlier, you did mention COVID a little bit in your remarks. So I'm just curious. I know people have a little bit of COVID fatigue, and we're all tired of the pandemic and ready for it to go away. And the vaccines are here, and hopefully they can start getting administered a little bit more quickly. But I am curious, though, what operational adjustments, if any, did your shop have to make within the last year during the pandemic, and maybe how has it impacted your business?
Well, we've been very fortunate and blessed that our main customers are air carriers that are cargo operators, so they're moving cargo, and so we have never really slowed down with that, and they've probably been more busy than they've ever been. So we're very fortunate there. Our parent company did implement a policy that at work, to try to maintain social distancing, we are required to wear a mask at work, which is always interesting when you're struggling in a panel or something, and pretty soon you're very hot because you have this mask on. But that said, the company has done a good job. The employees have done a good job of following procedure, and we're fortunate that no one in our immediate work group has had COVID. So that's very fortunate. And then it was very exciting when the vaccine got to Alaska. One of our customers needed an aircraft, and the sole purpose was to take vaccine to rural Alaska, to the western villages in rural Alaska that seemed to be hit hard by COVID. So we were able to resolve an issue with them so that they could meet their timeline. And they took that plane and they literally kind of just hopscotched along the coast of western Alaska, from Bethel to Unalakleet to Nome to all the smaller villages in between to distribute the vaccine. So that was kind of exciting to be part of that. So.
Yeah, that's such a good point there too, and also illustrates what we talked about earlier and how important general aviation is. And in a state like Alaska, it's going to rely on general aviation to deliver the vaccines to those smaller communities and the rural communities. So, yeah, great points, and just a wonderful, literally a life-saving service that that aviation provides, and it's really awesome that repair stations play an important part in that. So, Susan, I know, thank you so much for your time. I hope we can catch up in person, maybe at the AA convention later this year. But before we go, do tell us what would be the best way for pilots and aircraft owners to contact you, and also maybe is there anything that we missed or you'd like to add?
Well, I just want to add how important the AEA has been in my career. I'll never forget the first AEA I went to, and I don't know what year, in Atlanta. And I didn't really know very many people. I knew some of the vendors, but I started to meet my peers at that convention. And through the years, I've met so many talented technicians, talented vendors and field service people through AEA, and I can't tell you how valuable that has been in so many ways, on where to get a part or who to talk to, or knowledge of, okay, I know you've done an install with this equipment before. What do you do when this happens? Types of scenarios. And I just think the leadership at AEA through the years has been just solid, and probably doesn't get the thank yous as much as they should. But I know people like me think about that all the time on just how valuable it is. And yeah, I was very sad that the convention was canceled, but hope to be in Dallas in June. I hope that goes, because yeah, just very, very important to me, the association and what it's done for me personally and for the various places that I've worked over the years. Can't say enough about it. But if anyone wants to get a hold of us, we have a website. It's accessoryservicesinc.com. My email is on that website. Devin's email is on that website. And so, yeah, reach out to us. I mean, we do some interesting things. One of the things that we do, which isn't really avionics, but we support a lot of CASA parts. So that's an old aircraft, but it's a pretty tight group of CASA operators worldwide. So, but yeah, and if anyone wants to, they can reach out on my cell phone, 907-240-1210. I'm happy to talk to anyone. Just remember, I'm in Alaska, so
Right.
don't call at 3 a.m. But happy to talk to anyone, and hopefully all the other repair stations are surviving, and we all have a stronger, better 2021.
No doubt about that, and your comments, which are much appreciated. I mean, it reminds me of, you did mention one convention being Atlanta, probably in the late 90s, but it reminds me of the old saying that Monty Mitchell used to have, as you know, who's the former executive director of the AEA many years ago, used to say, if once you come to one AEA convention, you'll be coming for the rest of your career. So I think your words certainly echo that. And Susan, thank you so much for joining us here on AEA Amplified. That's Susan Wendell Beam. And as she mentioned, you can learn more about accessory services online at accessoryservicesinc.com. That's accessoryservicesinc.com. And I also might say that you can read more about the company, which was featured in the pages of Avionics News back in February of 2020. So certainly check out that AEA member profile written by Christine Knauer in the archives of avionicsnews.net. Certainly check out that story. It's a good one. So before we go, let me also remind our listeners of some important items. And first, the dates, as Susan mentioned, of the AEA convention this year. It has been moved from the original March timeframe, and the new dates are June 22nd through the 25th at the Hilton Anatole in Dallas, Texas. And all convention attendee registrations, as well as any exhibitor contracts that were previously transacted for those original dates in March, they will be automatically moved to the new dates in June, so you don't need to take any further action on that. But if you would like to attend the show and you have not registered yet, you can take advantage of the early bird registration, and that has been extended as well. The deadline for that is now March the 31st. And through the early bird, you can save $180 per person off your registration. So you can learn more about the show and register at aea.net/convention. Also, the annual Avionics News Technical Training Exam is now available for avionics technicians, and the exam may be taken online by AEA members or downloaded by non-members. And by completing the exam, which covers the regulatory and technical topics that are featured in last year's editions of Avionics News, all technicians can get a head start on your FAA accepted training. So individuals who complete the exam and score 85% or higher do receive credit toward the repair station training program requirements, their IA renewal, FAA AMT awards, and the AEA Avionics Training Excellence Award. So if you are up for the test, You can take it online at avionicsnews.net. And finally, if you are interested in pursuing professional opportunities in the avionics industry, don't forget about the jobs listing page on the AEA website. It's your one-stop resource. The AEA Jobs Board provides informational links on how to get AET certified, an avionics technician job summary and wage review, along with scholarship opportunities within the industry. So search the AEA's job listings and see what's on your horizon. Free resume posting is also available, so visit the jobs board at aea.net/jobs. And that's going to wrap it up for today, and we hope you can join us again soon for another episode of AEA Amplified, presented by Genesis Aerosystems, a leading provider of integrated avionics systems for military and civil operators around the world. From rugged integrated flight displays to flight control systems for rotor and fixed-wing aircraft, Genesis has solutions to increase safety and decrease pilot workload, whatever the mission may be. To learn more about Genesis and how it can help your customers, visit genesis-aerosystems.com. Until next time on AEA Amplified, so long everybody, and be safe.